Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Ad Age Remotely, and thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Bonilla, agency reporter with Ad Age. It's that special time of year again. Our A-list and creativity awards are open, and it's crazy to think because we just had our gala. But if you haven't had a chance to look at our submission site, you can head out to adage.com/AC Awards 2023. We often get questions about these awards, and we thought it'd be a great opportunity to take time to get to every question that you've probably wanted to ask over the years. We will get to our most frequently asked questions, and we will also discuss the 9 new categories that have been added this year. Here to provide some insights are 2 Ad Age editors who combined have over a decade of experience judging these awards. Please welcome creativity editor Anne-Christine Diaz and executive editor Judy Pollack. Hey guys.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Thanks. How does it feel to be? Yeah, how does it feel to be, the ones getting interviewed this time rather than the other way around?
Oh, I hate being on this side.
But I'm afraid of Brian. He asks tough questions, so
I know.
No, you're just saying.
But we know we've been doing this for, it feels like more than a decade. It feels like 50 years. And we know this experience intimately from the other side as being judges. So we're here to answer as many questions as we can within about 25 minutes. And we're excited to dig into it. It feels like we just did this though.
No, it's insane. And before we get started, if anyone's watching through the various social channels where this is available, we will try our best to gather questions as we go along. So please feel free to ask questions during this live stream. And I guess a good way to start this is the question I get all the time. What exactly makes a good A-list entry, and how can agencies stand out?
Who wants to start?
Oh, I can go. Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, for me, it's always about the story, right? Every agency has a story to tell, and you have a story to tell within a particular year. Tell us about what made you excellent across a range of different things, across the work, across business success, across your agency culture, but also do so within the context of what's going on in the industry. Because you don't work in a bubble. Your job is to respond to what clients' needs are. And so how did you do that with your work? And then also your job is to create a community, a culture that will create this great work for clients. So what did you do to build that? Tell us about that picture, that story, paint the picture for us.
Yeah, I agree completely because, agencies are in the business of telling stories, right? And they do it for clients all the time, but they don't actually do it, I think, as well sometimes for themselves. And I think that's when you go to do your entry, approach it that way. What made our year different than somebody else's? What made us special? Most agencies have similar capabilities. So what makes what you do different than somebody else? And how does that reflect in your culture, your purpose, how you look out into the world, and also what you're doing for your clients specifically?
Yeah, and try to get as much of the personality of your agency in there as possible, because all companies are reacting to similar things. We're all living in the same environment. For example, when the pandemic happened, we got so many stories about how agencies pivoted for the clients. So it wasn't that original to hear, but when people provided details about what they did specifically for their people and for their specific clients that helped their business, helped their people succeed, that's what made those entries stand out.
Yeah, for sure. And do you guys feel like an agency has to be, I guess, well-rounded, in their entry? Judy,
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, we want to see everything, right? We're looking at a lot of things. We're not just looking at your creative work. We're looking at your business financial results. We're looking at your your creative work. I personally love to see as much as you can talk about in terms of client results. What did a campaign do? How did it sell for your client? How did it actually perform? We're looking at your DE&I initiatives, very important. What are you doing in terms of DE&I? What is your culture like? How are you trying to be a good citizen in the world and for your employees? I think all of these things are going to play into a well-rounded entry.
And speaking about results, that's very important. But I think a lot of times maybe different agencies prioritize maybe different results for different clients, right? So, are there particular results or ways that these results should be, presented to us? And I don't know if you want to start.
Well, yeah, I mean, we see all sorts of results, right? There's actual business success. So, as many stats or numbers, as much data as you can provide around that will make for a stronger entry. But we understand that sometimes some of that information is confidential. You can't disclose it, but just give us as much context as possible so that we can actually see that there was some sort of success. Some random figure that's floating in the middle of nowhere, that's not going to give us context. We need context.
So
Judy,
if you
anything
can't,
to add?
yeah, if you can't give an actual number, this was our revenue. You can give us a growth range. We can't give you the number, but it was up 7% or whatever from the previous year. And I would also be careful about being as honest as possible about that. Because we've seen some entries, we've seen growth numbers that just seem like really out of whack with what the rest of the industry is doing. And we will check with our data center to see, and there have been entries that we've actually realized that they were not truth-telling in it. So be honest in your entry. And sometimes it's down. Tell us it's down. Tell us why it's down. Sometimes that even makes for a better story. It was down and we're back most of the way. Or here's why it was down and how we're trying to get around it.
Exactly. I mean, we want you to be as creative as possible when you're telling your stories, but be creative and honest as well.
Don't get creative with the numbers.
Yeah, don't get creative with the numbers. Because Judy mentioned our data center. We have brilliant people at our data center who will check those figures for us. Anyone who's worked on the agency report knows. So be cautious about that because we'll definitely check.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Judy, about the growth numbers, because I know there's some agencies that are part of a public holding company that they can't disclose specific numbers, but it is important for us to have a sense of what those numbers are.
Yeah, and there's other ways, even if it's just a range. Also, look through sometimes the call transcripts of your holding company where your CEO is calling out different names. You could say our CEO called us out for being the highest growth, agency in the portfolio this year or whatever. Just think of different ways that you can actually show momentum within your entry.
Yeah.
And you guys kind of touched on a little bit about, kind of what not to do. Are there other things that agencies or should avoid in their submissions?
Yes.
And do you want to start? Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of times we see submissions where people will say not for publication, but in our entry form, we specifically say anything that you put we should be able to make public when we write about you. So consider that, like, even though you put not for publication, it's fair game for publication if you put it in the entry, or we can just totally ignore it. I know it's you're trying to game. We know you're trying to game the system that way. Give us some context that you're probably not allowed to provide, but it's not fair to other people who are putting as much out there as they can. So anything that you put in the submission is fair game for publication.
Yeah, you have to remember that we're going to have to explain our choices, right? We write stories about why this agency is on the list. And so if you have a lot of stuff that's not for publication in there, that does us no good at all, because what are we going to say? This agency is really doing great work and it's got a lot of cool new business, but we can't tell you who it is or what it is they're actually doing. So don't waste your time putting stuff in that we can't actually write about.
Yeah, and the other thing what I thought about is don't put in work that you know was actually released the year prior. Um, time
Yeah.
frames do matter for this. Could you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, be mindful of the eligibility period for both A-list and creativity awards because we'll check, A-list is judged by the Ad Age team. Creativity awards are judged by a team of industry veterans and leaders. And, we're mindful of what the rules are. So, don't waste your time submitting something that was old or that is a little bit outside the boundaries. If it's for example a campaign that began prior to the eligibility period but had new executions within the eligibility period, include those executions. Tell us what made the campaign great this year.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
love case studies. Case studies are great, but a lot of
Yeah.
them then you'll mark the case study, well, not for publication, or you can't use. So again, that's not useful to us also. So
do you feel like a case study is crucial to a successful submission?
I want to know what your work did for a client, and that's what a case study will do. I mean, I think of it almost like an Effie award. We want to know how effective what you do is. And so, yes, I think case studies are fantastic.
Yeah, but also, we know that a lot of agencies don't have the manpower or the budget to put together a full-blown, well-produced case study. That information could also be elegantly described in, the entry itself or in a PDF. But make sure you do it well. Make sure you do it clearly. Make sure you tell the story. Just make sure all the information is there.
I think that's especially important for maybe digital agencies where the work is maybe not as easy to explain sometimes, or not as kind of in your face. What makes a digital agency stand out specifically? And
Oh, well, yeah. When you say that, Brian, I think of entries that we've seen in the past that have been just pages and pages of a PDF laying out charts and graphs and stats. And it's like we look through hundreds of entries. So, it's going to be hard for us to tackle that. Our eyes will start to glaze over. Tell us the story. We keep emphasizing this, but tell us the story. There is a story to what you did for your client, what it did for their business. You don't have to throw in all the stats. Just tell us what happened. Something great happened. Explain it for us. Explain it like you're explaining it to a 10-year-old. you know, just make it easy and digestible for people who maybe don't have, the knowledge of you know how digital agencies operate or what you do for the client.
Yeah, what was the insight or the data point that actually informed a really creative solution from your agency?
And also, what was the problem
Right.
too?
How did you solve it?
Yeah.
yeah, you know, real quick, I'd like to give some shout outs to Jose from Puerto Rico, Alan from California, Orit from Canada, Tony, and Shabura. Thank you for watching.
Hey, Al,
Um,
thanks.
um, one more thing I want to touch on in terms of deadlines. Obviously, this is a two-tiered submission process, right? There's one deadline. It's $500 per category. And that deadline is for November 2nd. And after that, the pricing increases a bit to $650 per category until the final deadline on December 6th. One question I got was, can you lock in a pricing now for a $500 submission, but complete and edit the submission up until the December 6th deadline? Judy?
No. We talked to the business side on this one. It's a hard no. I think Anne had a really kind of fun thing talking about Disneyland.
Oh, it's like if you go to Disneyland and you ask somebody to hold your place so you can go off and ride, the Matterhorn and then come back to ride the next ride. Like they're doing the work, everybody else is doing the work. You have to do the work too. And not have fun while everybody else is doing the work. There's a reason that one price is lower. It's to reward those people who get things in on time, and it's higher maybe to punish those people who don't get those things. No, not really. But yeah, no, there's a reason we have that tiered pricing. So yeah, just adhere to that. As long as you make that first date, you can lock in that first price.
We do have a question from Emily on Twitter. How do you think inflation will impact, how people talk about their work or revenue or growth or things like that in their submissions this year? I don't know if you've given that any thought.
Yeah, I think that inflation is going to be a big deal, even more so next year, to tell you the truth. But yes, but it's no different than, say, the pandemic, right? It affected everybody pretty much equally. So, I think all agencies are going to be dealing with it. And within your entry, you can be as specific as you want. You can even say, well, we had anticipated growth of XYZ, and it's probably going to be a little less so. I just think honesty is always the best policy in your entries. But yes, I think it's going to be a much bigger factor going forward, even next year.
Right. And it's also an opportunity to tell us about how you're helping clients prepare for that.
Right.
You've all experienced going through the pandemic. How did that teach you to deal with what's coming up? So that could be part of your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I think besides what makes a good entry, the other question I get all the time is, do you need a Super Bowl spot? Do you need can line winning work to make it on the A-list?
No. I mean, that's such a silly question to me. The entire advertising and marketing industry is not the Super Bowl. It's not Cannes. It's so many things. It's what you do for your client. What impact do you have for the client? What innovation do you bring to the industry at large? What do you do for your people? There's so many things. Yeah. A Super Bowl spot does not an A-list winner make, that's just one facet of greatness. There's many ways you can be great as an agency.
Yeah, there's such a broad definition of marketing today. I mean, looking at it just like a TV commercial, even is a Super Bowl commercial, is sort of a narrow-minded view. We're looking at great ideas, great executions in all different ways, all different media. It could be cool digital idea, an amazing experiential thing. There's just so many broader ways of looking at it. So no, you don't have to have a Super Bowl spot. If you have a good one, we'll look at it. But yeah.
Yeah, of course. And we've had A-list winners who wouldn't even do a Super Bowl spot. That's not in their purview. Right. So yeah, no.
I do want to get into new categories, but before I do, I had some questions for the Creativity Awards specifically. The people entries, there's a few people entries on the creativity side, such as like Chief Creative Officer of the Year, right? In your experience, Anne, what makes a good people entry submission?
Yeah, so the people category is super interesting and super important to the industry, because this is where we recognize the talents who are pushing it forward, who are making it better. But we need to see how they're doing that. And it's not just through the work. In those entries, like poor entries that we've seen in the past, just stick a bunch of work in them, but they tell us nothing about the person, about their qualities as a leader. So you really need to tell that story as well. You can't just look at a spot and translate that to who that person is. You should include testimonials, stories about how this person helped elevate, the creative department or the strategy department. Just tell us about the person, because the judges don't necessarily know this person. They maybe never worked with them. And that's not necessarily supposed to even factor into, how this person is judged. We need a full picture of this person's contributions, not just the work.
And can I add to that? Within the time frame of what we're judging,
Right.
like a lot of people tend to think it's sort of a lifetime achievement award,
Yeah.
and it's not. It's about what they did this specific year.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Judy. That's a super important point. I do remember last year having to go through some of the submissions to check. Yeah, this is an awesome thing, but this happened like 5 years ago. What did they do this year? So, yeah, make sure that you do include accomplishments that happened specifically this year. Maybe you can include the background to show kind of the evolution of this person, but definitely, first and foremost, include what they've done this year.
And sticking with you, Anne, the other interesting part about the creativity awards is the production awards that we give out. What are the types of reels, companies should be submitting for production, post-production, and things like that?
Yeah, obviously, you should send in your best work. If it's a production company, make sure to showcase the work from a range of talent. We don't want to just see all the spots by the one A-list director on your roster. Show us how you've helped nurture the careers of your entire bench of talents. Also, in the past, we've seen people submit sizzle reels, which tells us nothing. It's like 5 seconds of 10 different spots. We don't know what you did on this. If you're an editorial company, you have to show us the cuts that are so special. Show us the craft in each of the pieces. And we're not going to get that from some compilation.
Yeah. I would say the same applies even just for the A-list
Yeah.
as well, because, I see submissions where there's a nice compilation video, but I don't actually get to see the work that is being promoted in it. And it kind of dilutes the idea, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, but also be judicious about what you put in. Just put in the best spot, put in the most representative spot, because I know that the space is limited, especially with the A-list submissions. I think there's a little more room for the creative agency and the production companies. But with the other ones where the space is more limited, be very mindful about what you include.
And now I want to get into the new categories. We have 9 new categories this year. I'd like to just kind of walk through each one. We could start with the new A-list categories, Judy.
Okay.
The first one is, and I'm excited about this one personally, the Business Transformation Agency of the Year. What can how should people submit for that?
Well, it's not easy to get Brian excited, so I'm really glad. The Business Transformation category of the year, some people have taken this to mean transforming your own agency. That's not it. It's about transforming the business of your client. So it can be anything from rethinking their offerings to recasting their brand mission, anything that will allow them to have a seamless consumer experience. So, like, for example, and this is a crazy thing I'm making up on my own, but if it's an airline, if you recast it so it's not in the travel business so much, it's in the connection business, for example. And there's a whole campaign or strategy to now create LinkedIn groups of businessmen or ways to reunite families or things like that. So taking it a step up and trying to look at a different way of looking at a business and transforming their brand mission. Or it could be in the pandemic, it was a huge thing. There were people who did not have curbside delivery. So creating a curbside delivery program, a new app that makes things more seamless for a brand to connect with their consumer. There's a lot of things that fit within that, new technologies, new whatever, but it's just really how you're transforming the business of your client.
Yeah, also, I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
Make sure that you tell us exactly what your role in that was. Was it your idea to introduce that transformational idea? Or was it the client who asked you to do that? Did you just do the marketing around that? If it was your idea, that's awesome. You should shout it from the mountaintops and tell us about it. Hopefully your client will let you do that. Also, that reminds me of another thing. We've seen campaigns or these big ideas that people submit. And it's kind of like we wonder, where did that idea come from? Was that the agencies or was that the clients? Be transparent about that. If you just did the marketing around a cool idea, tell us, because we're going to dig. We're going to figure that out if you didn't come up with that idea. And also, like, we were talking about this earlier, often there are a lot of different kinds of agencies involved in a certain idea. Make sure to tell us what your role was. Like, don't try to fudge it. If another agency was the one who came up with a big idea, don't pretend that you did.
Or what your role in it was. Often we'll get
Yeah.
5 agencies claiming credit for the same campaign. And yes, I'm sure they touched it in each different ways, but be specific in how you touched it.
Yeah, and it will help. It might even open our eyes to something we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
2 other ones: experiential agency of the year and healthcare agency of the year. We can start
It's
with
a little more self-explanatory, but experiential is right. Any touch point that you help connect the brand with the consumer. So it could be, pop-up stores or virtual events, or, bringing a brand to life in any kind of new way that's identifiable to the brand, making it stand out. That's a little more self-explanatory, I think. Healthcare is the same thing, but we really want to make sure it's a discrete business. If you're an agency who happens to do a cool healthcare campaign and it's a one-off, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for an agency as discrete healthcare practice, and it couldn't be a network. It doesn't have to be an individual agency. It can be an indie or part of a network. But they're doing amazing and cool work in the area of healthcare, which is obviously super hot right now.
And the last new one on the A-list side, best agency culture.
Yeah, this is, it's actually, culture has changed so much. When I first started, it was like, oh, we have a foosball table and we have a Friday happy hour. And that is like so not what the world is about anymore. So we're looking at, benefits, DE&I initiatives, super important. How many people, women or people of color do you have in your leadership positions? What kind of incentives are you giving your employees? What kind of cool programs, mental health days, sabbaticals? Can you be fully remote? How are you handling that? And then whether you're a good corporate citizen, like, are you a B Corp? How are your sustainability programs going? Are you a good corporate citizen? But holistically, it's like, culture means, are your agencies proud to go and work there every day? What makes you identifiable as a different culture than the agency down the street?
You brought up
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on. Yeah.
Judy, you brought up DE&I. That's a huge factor now in our A-list judging. People ask questions about that. There are struggles to bring diversity to your agency. People have talked about, we're in a part of the country where it's not so diverse. We can't bring in talent. There are ways to do that. Like, tell us, sure, that's a struggle, but what are you doing about it? Like, people have adopted or are more embracing remote working, and that's one way to bring in diversity. Are you doing that? Tell us. It's a struggle for a lot of people, but tell us how much progress you've made, like legitimate progress. Show us how it was different compared to last year, compared to the year before, not just with numbers too, but with, stories, anything, the work, anything that you can, like, any hard examples that you can give us to show us that diversity is becoming a more important part of your culture at the agency. I just need to underscore that.
And numbers, yeah, because you can see in some of the entries that you're looking at, it's like, well, we increased, 100%. Great, that meant you had 1 and now you have 2. What I really can't have a problem with in entries is we talk about diversity. It's like, we're 50% women. That's great. Love women. I'm a woman myself. I would love, but okay, but that's only part of the picture. How many people of color do you have? How many people with disabilities do you have? How many people in leadership do you have? How is that changing? I think that's more important. Just to read about X amount of women, I just think is kind of dodging the question.
Yeah, for sure. And next, I'd like to touch on the new creativity award categories that we have. I would like to start with the more not so obvious ones in terms of what it means. But so social campaign of the year and how that's different from the best brand social media presence of the year.
Oh, well, social campaign is a specific campaign. It's a specific piece of work tied to a client. Best brand social media presence, that's a brand that is just awesome on social. You know who we're talking about. The ones who are fluent in that space, who we look forward to hearing from every year or just every day. But one is a campaign, and then one is what a brand is doing all year round. And also, we do have another people category focused on social leads, and that one is specifically for people behind that work. So yeah, there are distinctions. So please be mindful of the actual descriptions. The descriptions lay it out, so don't confuse those. We saw a little bit of confusion last year. People nominated a person when it was supposed to be a brand that was nominated. So just read the descriptions carefully.
Yeah. The other one, there's a creative technologist of the year award. Could you explain that one a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has become so much more important, especially now with new technologies affecting or impacting the work. So somebody who is a superstar in that space, any person, they may not have come up through traditional ad channels. They could have been programmers, or somebody who just a creative who loved that space and learned more about it, but somebody who just has skills, creative skills in that space. And again, when you tell that story, make sure to show the work as well as details about the person themselves.
And the other two new ones, there's one that's the film, TV, or video of the year. And then there's the print, design, out of home work of the year. And did you want to kind of touch on those a bit?
Those are pretty self-explanatory too.
Yeah.
But we never had them. And they seemed so, when we first started the awards, we didn't think we needed them. But as the years have progressed, we realized we did. These are still staples of the industry, and they're still powerful mediums, and we feel that they should be honored. We do have a craft category as well that focuses on how those are done really elegantly and artfully, but film, TV, video, and print design out of home is for both the idea and the craft. So yeah, we just open it up to those, even though we didn't before.
For sure. And we actually have a question from Jen on Twitter, who would like to learn a little more about what the actual judging process is like and who's involved. Judy, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Well, Anne touched on this a little bit too. Creativity awards have external judges, but the A-list awards are Ad Age, editors and reporters, actually. As the awards have gotten bigger and we've had more entries, we've actually increased our judges so that it's not just, say, Anne and myself and Brian, the people who cover agencies, Alex. It's pretty much everybody on staff at this point gets a look at it. So it actually gives us a holistic view of what you're putting in, because there are people who cover, say, digital or marketing also looking at your entries. So we have a really diverse group of people actually looking at the entries for A-list.
Yeah, and I would add, like, it's a multi-round process. It's not a one and done situation.
Right.
Yeah.
We go through rounds.
Have many conversations.
spirited sometimes.
Yeah. And I would like to add, it does benefit from having the whole team on board, because these are people who know their beats super well. So if it's, somebody includes an auto or a beer campaign, EJ, for example, will, school us on why this was super cool or why it wasn't actually. So yeah, you get, you get the benefit of that insight.
And I also, get this question a lot: is it worth an agency applying if they don't feel like maybe they have a chance of winning, but they want a chance to maybe get in front of us? Do you think that's worth it, Judy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many agencies that I really wasn't familiar with until I read their entries. And I think it's useful, definitely useful for me. And I think it's useful for an agency too, who really wants to get the word out about who they are. I mean, a lot of people can't afford publicists or whatever. You don't need that, right? I mean, if you're, well, you can obviously, and that's a good thing. But, if you can still get our attention if you enter the awards and you have a really good entry, we're going to learn more about you, even though you're not a winner. I think
Right.
that's important. And it might give us story ideas or things down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a young new agency that hasn't had time to promote yourself all year long because you're just so busy trying to get your business off the ground, but doing super exciting work. And, now A-list time, now is a time that maybe you can look back and see, oh, shit, we did so much great stuff. Maybe we should try to submit. That's a good entryway, for us, even though you should be, communicating with us all year round, ideally. Maybe sometimes you can't, but this is a good opportunity to do that.
And I agree, first of all, because it gives me a chance to learn about agencies that I don't get to maybe speak to that often. Do you think, and now speaking about the winners, does being a previous winner maybe, hurt or help, in the next year?
Anne? All right.
Oh, Anne.
I'm passing that to Anne.
Well, I get, it's kind of sad, but it does make it a little bit harder, because you're not only competing with the rest of the industry, you're also competing with yourself. Are you going to top what you did last year? Are you going to stand out as much as you did last year? How did you evolve from that awesome peak that you hit last year?
Right.
But it's just, more encouragement to keep going and keep being awesome. So yeah, maybe it does. But I feel like previous winners do know that,
Yes.
you're very familiar with this phenomenon. I don't know what you call it.
I don't know if you want to add anything, Judy.
No, I thought she said it all.
Yeah, and I guess the last one, a lot of agencies I think feel like maybe they're strong in one or two parts, maybe creatively, but maybe not so much on the new business side. Can an agency win when they feel like maybe they're not as well rounded, or they have 2/3, a success story? What do you guys think?
Well,
And I'll give this a yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, good, Judy, you can go.
Well, I mean, everything sort of fits into it. So, I mean, but if you have a creative idea and you have decent business results and you have good results for your clients, I think that's so important. I really like to see numbers, if you can, what this actually did for your client. And the other thing is too, if you don't submit, if you can help it, three ads from the same client. Like, I want to see breadth, whatever you have. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering the question right, but I think everybody has an equal chance, I really believe, as long as you're really smart with your entry and you tell your own story in the right way, which works for you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe you're weaker in one category, but if those 2 other areas or 3 other areas are super strong, of course you have a chance. You know, I personally wouldn't think that, you know, somebody who just has all business wins and crappy creative and crappy culture, I don't think they would make it to the A list. I wouldn't vote them onto the A list. Yeah, it has to be show some kind of breadth and attention to all of these things that we think are important. Um, with creative, for example, um, if you think you have super awesome creative, you should also consider entering for Creative Agency of the Year, you know, because for that category, we look to as the one that will inspire the industry to think bigger, think more interestingly. And, you know, maybe the business results aren't as stringent when we judge that. So consider entering that too. That's not to say you shouldn't enter an A list. We've had agencies before who've won both. Um, so yeah, just I would say look at what you have to offer, and if you do have, you know, a breadth in your entry, go for it with A list. If you think it's, you know, just great creative, maybe just go for creative.
Yeah, and that holds, I think, for everything, right? So
Yeah.
if you're really strong in like maybe you want to apply for a meeting agency in data and insights as well. If you have one thing that you're super strong at, or if you had a very cool experiential campaign, but you think the rest of it isn't going to, you know, leapfrog to the top of the A list, enter experiential. I mean, that's why we have more categories. Everybody gets more of a chance. So think about what you're strongest at and where your entry should go. I mean, I don't want to discourage you from going in A list, do that too. But I think if you're very clever, remember there's a lot of agencies and only 10 slots on that A list. So think about where you really best fit. That would be my pro tip.
I agree. Don't be afraid to, you know, apply to multiple categories either. That does not hurt you in any way. But yeah, I mean, before I close this out, guys, this was very insightful and very interesting, even just for me to hear. But is there anything that you guys wanted to kind of leave our audience with before I close this one out?
I would just ask one thing. Every year I get people calling me afterwards saying, why am I not on the list? There are hundreds of entries. It is impossible for us to go through every one and try and benchmark exactly, you know, why, and many judges as well, right? So, and we appreciate the effort. And if we could give you a solid answer, but honestly, the real answer, and this is what I give to people, and it's the God's honest truth, is your entry was good, but somebody's entry was a little bit better. I mean, there's only 10 slots, you know, so that's one thing that I would hope people, you know, not do.
And for me, I just want to reiterate, you know, think about your story. You know, we talk to you guys all the time. You tell us so many amazing things. You share so many great ideas with us. You have your own story. It's in there. So give it to us. Tell us. And also tell us in the context of the greater world out there. And also, you know, maybe you're watching what your competitors are doing. So think about why you're different from them, and just put that all in a nice package for us.
Yeah, and one just final thing is tell it in plain English, because we get so many things. You know, we are, you know, a culture forward, digital first, performance oriented.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole bunch of jargon listed together. You know, it's so everybody is that these days. You know, I once interviewed somebody who said at the end of the day, our job is to still sell stuff for clients, and that really is what your job is. So I would be as clear and as succinct as possible. Hold off on the jargon, talk about what you're really about.
I agree. And this was a great conversation, both of you. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I hope, you know, our viewers really enjoyed that. You know, and keep in mind, our submissions are open until December 6th. As I mentioned before, there is a 2-tier submission process if you want to submit earlier or at the later deadline. And for details on how to enter, please check out our site at adage.com/AC Awards 2023. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.